North Carolina ranks dead last in the nation for public school funding. A new Education Law Center reports gives the state failing grades, placing it 51st overall. The report shows North Carolina spends about $5,600 less per student than the national average and continues to lag in education investment. Education advocates say years of inaction by state leaders are leaving public schools and educators behind.
Cafeteria workers are under attack. What do we do? Stand up, fight back! Our public schools are under attack. What do we do? Stand up, fight back! When our students are under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back!
You all just want more money. This is a bigger issue than teacher pay. Now, teacher pay is a huge issue. But the other issue, which is as big a issue, maybe even a bigger issue, but they work hand in hand, is the lack of investments in our schools.
I'm sorry. It's not okay to brag about being number one in the country for business, but being number 50 in the country for what we give to public education. That's not a sustainable ratio.
Maybe they're doing school supply drives or things like that that are great, but that's just a band-aid to fix the problem that the legislature already is creating.
And until we advocate for change, that change is not going to happen.
Hey, I'm Matthew from Chocolate Diamond Media. I was talking with my podcast partner from Talking About the Big Stuff, Mike, and he told me how his son's school didn't have budget for the rest of the school year. We found out from other parents that seemed to be a theme across the state of North Carolina. That led us down a path to Get Schooled, learning about the burden of education in North Carolina. At the time we started this documentary, it had been almost a year since the last deadline for passing a budget had passed. Our first stop was Raleigh, North Carolina, where we talked to Wake County Commissioner Cheryl Stallings.
My name is Cheryl Stallings. I'm currently a county commissioner in Wake County. I represent District 3, which is parts of Apex, Cary, and Morrisville. So as a county commissioner, we fund a lot of services for the people of Wake County. There are three big categories that we fund. Number one is public safety. That includes the sheriff's office, all EMS services for the county, and fire services in the unincorporated parts of the county. Number two is health and human services, and that includes public health, social services, and some mental health services. And number three is public education, which is a huge investment. And that includes preschool services for our underserved 3 and 4-year-olds. It includes a significant amount of funding for the Wake County Public School System, K through 12, and it also provides funding for Wake Tech Community College. In terms of public education, about half of our budget goes to public education. Now, some of that includes capital costs. So one thing it's important for people to know that county commissioners in North Carolina are responsible for the buildings. We are responsible for funding new buildings as well as renovations to our buildings. The General Assembly is responsible for the operating expenses of our schools. And operating expenses means salaries, health care benefits, retirement benefits, but it also means buses and transportation costs and fuel costs associated with that. It also means I said, bus drivers, bus driver salaries, teacher salaries. So all of those operating expenses and instructional supplies, all kinds of instructional supplies, whether it be textbooks or digital materials. So those are all called operating expenses. And so what's happening with county commissioners, we get asked in all 100 counties, we get asked to make sure we're funding the buildings, the new schools and the renovations. And now we're also being asked to stand in this funding gap of operational expenses that the General Assembly is not funding. So as I said earlier, the operating expenses that the Wake County budget covers for Wake County Public School System this year is over $700 million. So Wake County taxpayers are paying about 1/3 of the Wake County Public School System's operating expenses. And that's why property taxes are the way they are in Wake County.
But it's not just county commissioners who are getting involved. We found out that the PTA at the Davis Drive Elementary School in Wake County was taking things into their own hands, so we went and crashed one of their picnics.
Yeah, so this event, we're doing a picnic with our school community. We invited the entire school. The goal was two things. First, to just give opportunities for families to meet each other, to mingle, and to foster that close community that we want to build in our school. And then we also invited some local officials. So we have a representative of our county commissioner board, we have a school board member coming, and a representative from our town council that will be coming. They're just chatting with families. It gives families an opportunity to get some FaceTime with them and actually see who these people are that are representing me. And gives them the opportunity to share what's important to them, what they're concerned about, ask questions about how the officials want to address some of these issues, which is very important, especially this year, and we're upcoming on a big election in November. So we're kind of seeing it across the board. Teachers are struggling to fill their classrooms with what they need. And so what we've been focused on in our PTA this year is trying to fill in those gaps where we can. But obviously we can't ask families to give what they don't have. So another thing that we've been doing a lot of is educating families on who their representatives are, which is why we're here at this event today. But also, you know, how does school funding work? What different groups in our state deal with school funding? So some of it comes from the county, some of it comes from the state. And then what role does PTA have? Because a lot of the small things that don't get covered in either the county or the state budget, we can support, whether that's with teacher supplies or help fundraising for new playground equipment. So we've been trying to encourage a lot of families to just learn about who's representing them, what they care about, and then seeing how they can get involved in our school communities.
I'm Brittany Richards. I serve on Cary Town Council and I represent District A. But really today I'm talking as a mom of 4 children in Wake County Public Schools. My husband and I are products of public schools ourselves. We are honored and delighted to be educating our own children through our public schools, and we are just a big believer in dedicating the resources to helping our schools thrive. And so that means that it is not the town's budget. We do not fund our public schools, but it is our school board, it is our county, and it is our North Carolina General Assembly that needs to devote the resources to compensating our teachers, to making sure that we have the supplies necessary, that our HVAC systems run. And so often it's PTAs and parents and teachers out of their own pockets that are filling those gaps. And if our schools were fully funded as they should be, it wouldn't be necessary for us as parents and PTAs and teachers to be spending that money where the government should be.
My name is Ryan Stumpy. I am currently the PTA president of Davis Drive Elementary in Cary, North Carolina, where I have 2 students. And I am in that position because we've been at that school for 5 years, and we love the teachers and the families that go to that school with us. And it's just very important for us to make sure that all of those students and families and teachers and staff have the resources to do their job and educate our future. Well, I think it's interesting at our school, we have a very international demographic, which I'm very thankful for because it makes all of our children more aware of the world around them. And the problems that we've created for our kids to solve are really going to take a global effort. So at Davis Drive, I'm thrilled that we have such an international population. What's difficult about making change is that votes count, and not all of our population at our school are allowed to vote in elections that directly affect what happens to their family. I'm not sure what the answer is to that. I do believe that if you're a family that uses the public school system, you should be able to vote on things that affect the public school system. That makes sense to me. Like, why shouldn't you be able to do that? If you're a part of the community, you should have a say in how that is affected. I would love to see pathways for all community members to be able to have a voice. Currently, I see that as organizations like the PTA or the NCEA, organizations that are able to connect a lot of people find a voice, find what is important to all of the voices in that community, and be able to talk to the people that make decisions with that large voice. As a community, what is our purpose? What can we do to make it better?
Well, most importantly, it is voting. And so I will say that we have 4 school board seats that will be on the ballot, including my seat. Um, Hope to be reelected to continue to do this great work. But it's also, I will say, as a school board and here in Wake County, we do not have taxing authority. So some school districts in the northern area do have the ability where there is some taxes that the school board can have that has that authority to address certain things. So the commissioners are not raising taxes. And that is something that we have requested for through our legislative agenda to address HVAC concerns, some of our deferred maintenance that we have put off to use those dollars to recruit and retain teachers. So what we have done with our deferred maintenance options, I kept saying I wasn't going to talk about the budget, but here I keep going into it, was using master's pay and other necessary things to keep our teachers in the classroom. So what can we do besides voting? It's showing up and writing your legislators emails. Now, I will say the Wake delegation is very friendly, but we do have some vulnerable legislators that are not in this particular part of the county, but the southern part of the county, who hold gavels. Representative Parade is the chair of the Appropriations Committee for Education. So that is where you all should start going, is sending her emails to talk about concerns that you all are seeing every day in the classroom and in the school community.
A week after we talked to Commissioner Stallings, we heard there was going to be a ballot measure to stop county commissioners from being able to raise property taxes. This was pretty shocking news considering that's the only way schools were getting funded. We took a drive out to Whiteville, North Carolina to meet with a candidate for NC House, District 46, Brittany Newton.
Hi, my name is Brittany Newton. I am a candidate running for North Carolina House, District 46. That is all of Columbus County and the eastern part of Robinson County. I am an Army veteran, served 8 years in the U.S. Army. I am also a mom of 2. I have a 4th grader and a 1st grader. As a parent of a 4th grader, my child started school when the pandemic was happening. And her class size is 31 right now. And 31 students to 1 teacher ratio. Our schools need to be funded. Our students are struggling because they're not getting the proper funding. Vouchers are good, but the main funds need to go back to our public school systems. And rural areas are struggling. Just my area alone is 95 percentile per child, the funding that is coming to each child in our public school systems. Columbus County is one of the lowest, and Robinson County is as well. Robinson County is 97 percentile per child for the funding that comes to that child. But during the pandemic, we had funding to fund our public school systems. Currently, we don't have that funding anymore. And our teachers are feeling the pressure, our students are feeling the pressure, and they're still having the same expectations as if there were smaller class sizes, and it's not.
The next day, we went out to a more local park to meet with Representative Julie Van Hafen from District 36.
The people have a right to the privilege of education, and it is the duty of the state to guard and maintain that right.
So we recently had a Court case, a state Supreme Court case dismissed around what was been known as the Leandro case that has been bounced around, as you mentioned, for 30 plus years. So I was wondering if you can give us a little summary of how it started, what it was, and what its relevance is today, even if it's been dismissed, the problems in it are relevant to today.
Yes, the Leander case started in the 90s, and it was a case that was filed by 5 more rural, smaller school districts in North Carolina. And basically, they just alleged that the state was not complying with our state constitution, which basically provides that every child get a sound basic education. The sound basic is not in our Constitution, but later it was interpreted that the language of our Constitution meant that every child deserved basically like an equal and a sound education, and that the Supreme Court and different courts along the way have ruled that basically our state is not doing that because of really it comes down to the inequities that are existing all across our state and have for over 30 years at this point. um, as a PTA leader at the state level and as a legislator now, I do visit a lot of schools across our state, and to see the inequities and the different level of resources, the different level of even just the buildings that students go to school in. I mean, it would probably shock a lot of people to go from maybe a school here in Wake County, a high school here, and a high school in a different county, and just see how vastly different they are in a lot of aspects. Now, that doesn't mean that that school in Mitchell County or Halifax County isn't doing a fantastic job. I mean, these teachers and administrators are doing the best that they can with maybe resources that they don't have. And so, but, under our state constitution, every child should have access to, say, a science lab. Every student should have access to a Spanish class, things like that. And we're just not seeing that, like, because it really comes down to, in my opinion, now, is that what's happened is that the state legislature has changed the way that they're funding public schools and pushing a lot of the responsibility down onto our counties. And so what's happening is that because counties only have a certain way to get taxes through property taxes, some of our counties have a lot less property tax base, and so they're not able to raise as much revenue to support their schools as a county like here in Wake County. And so that is creating a lot more inequities even than probably existed 30 years ago, because now we're seeing the richer counties, the more robust counties, the counties where people are moving to, are really able to, one, like, supplement their teacher salaries. They're able to help build these amazing buildings and facilities for their students, whereas counties in more rural parts of North Carolina that are honestly shrinking, and, like, people are leaving, there's not as much jobs there, they're not able to raise that kind of money. And so I think personally that those inequities are even worse now than they were maybe even when Leandra was filed.
So I know the budget is an issue and it's a big issue, but what else can the General Assembly be doing? I know that you've proposed bills before, so I'm interested in some of the bills that you've tried to get through the system to try to address these problems.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, over the last, 8 years since I've been there, I mean, I've filed many, many bills around education and worked with my colleagues on different bills. Just, for example, recently, like, we've been doing more work around accountability and the accountability and the funding of the private school voucher program, because we know that the private school voucher program, which is now putting billions, but they be dollars to this voucher program, is kind of the main source of funding that we could use to fund our public schools. And so we hear a lot, well, we don't have the money to do that, or we don't have the money to do significant raises, or more per pupil spending, but we do have the money. We're just choosing to spend it on these vouchers. And so we've been filing lots of bills and talking more about this program to make people aware of the lack of accountability around it and the fact that it is so much money. I don't think people really understand how much money is going toward it. I mean, so I come from this world, this public education world, from both sides. I worked as an advocate for many years before I was in the legislature, and it's really what you know inspired me to run for office. When I was thinking about doing it, I just thought, well, what better way can I make a change than to actually be in the rooms that these decisions are happening? Now, I haven't been able to do all those things because of the makeup of the legislature. So I would say, number one, that if you want to make a change in public education, we just have to elect more people that are going to fight for our public schools. People say, well, what can we do to change people's minds? honestly, we've been trying to do that for a very long time and it's not working. And so we have to focus on the other side. And that's just getting more people into office that are going to, promote, support, and champion our public schools, because we're not going to be able to change people's minds. I mean, I think, politically and the world is too entrenched and we're all in our camps. And unfortunately, education has gotten swept up in that partisan battle. It's always been a political issue because, politics govern the schools, but it's gotten even worse, over the last 10 years or so. And so I think like focusing on like making sure that the candidates that you're electing, you know how they stand on public education. I would also just say that we have to have a continuous push on this issue. What I've seen is a lot of stop starts. We see like the big May 1st rally and the march, which was fantastic because we haven't done anything like that since 2019. So I was very, very happy that, to see that be put together and that happen, but that can't be it. And what I get a little bit frustrated with is that people will come out and they'll go to the rally and they'll hold their sign and then they just kind of go back to their life. And you have to have a continuous effort to make any kind of change. And so just figuring out what that is, get involved with a local group. Your PTA, is a great group to get involved with. There's such great advocacy groups out in North Carolina. Public Schools First NC is a great one. NCAE, you can be a community member of NCAE. You don't have to be a teacher. Join NCAE, get on their calls and see what they're doing. There's so many other groups. This other fantastic group called Every Child NC, which was like basically created around the Leandra decision, but now they're, refocusing and they're doing some great work. So, I mean, get plugged in somewhere and make sure that you're just continuing to push on this issue because it can't just be a one-time conversation. It has to be multiple, months, years effort if we're going to make the change that we want to see.
To cool off after meeting with Julie, we went down to Raleigh, North Carolina to the nicely air conditioned legislative building to meet with Representative Sarah Crawford from District 66.
I'm Sarah Crawford. I represent House District 66 in the North Carolina House of Representatives, which includes parts of Wake County up into Wakefield, parts of Wake Forest, Rolesville, and Northeast Raleigh. I also serve as CEO at Tammy Lynn Center for Developmental Disabilities. We serve children and adults with special needs and their families, and we primarily do that through therapeutic services, residential services, care navigation, respite care, community living supports, a day program, and we also operate a school for children with severe and profound needs. We work directly with Wake County Public Schools to do that. Education is so critical, and what we have done in North Carolina really over the last probably 12 or 13 years is really systematically gut public school funding. And we've done that in a variety of ways through delayed raises for teachers. We are certainly facing that right now. Less funding, per pupil funding in our public schools. And we have something in North Carolina called the Opportunity Scholarship Program, which is a taxpayer funded private school voucher, which provides dollars for families to send their children to private schools. And there are a couple of things that are problematic with that. First and foremost, it pulls money directly out of public schools. And public schools, public education is where we deliver on the promise of equality. It's where we ensure that people have access to opportunities. It is where we ensure that people can get the education that they need for economic and social mobility, which helps our communities thrive, our individuals thrive, our families thrive, our communities, and our entire state. Here is my biggest problem with that. Again, not only does it pull money out of public schools, those taxpayer dollars are unaccountable. Private schools do not have to adhere to the same the same rules that public schools do in terms of providing school lunch, providing transportation, having licensed teachers, a curriculum standard. There just is not accountability. And those are your taxpayer dollars. Now, what we should be doing is reinstating the income cap, or maybe even getting rid of vouchers altogether and putting that money back into public schools. But when we talk about funding, when we talk about state dollars, when we talk about how decisions are made and how we can be good stewards of taxpayer dollars, your hard-earned dollars that you give to the state for us to make decisions, these bills, these budgets, they reflect priorities. And we shouldn't be sitting in North Carolina saying that our priority is to fund people who are already affording their lives, who are already thriving, who are already able to send their children to private school, when we have so many other needs in this state that we could be using those dollars for. One issue that's been very prevalent over the past several months is this issue around property taxes. People in North Carolina, across North Carolina, are struggling. Incomes are stagnant, wages are stagnant, and the cost of living keeps rising. And so there's been this real effort to look at how can we support families across North Carolina. And one issue that's been raised are property taxes. People's property taxes are going up, but let's talk about why that is. In North Carolina, when the state legislature, who has the power of the purse strings, does not make proper investments in infrastructure, in education, and healthcare, it is the counties and our municipalities that have to pick up that tab. And they really only have one way to do that. And so, unfortunately, because of decisions that the North Carolina General Assembly has made, we are putting the cost burden on our low and middle class income families who are already struggling to get by. So the state has not picked up their fair share of the tab. So for example, in Wake County often has to make decisions between, do we pay for emergency medical services and new ambulances, or do we pay to pick up the gap in teacher pay and educational funding because the state isn't doing their job? And that makes it incredibly difficult. And what we really should be looking at is all of the things that impact somebody's ability to thrive in North Carolina. We should be looking at educational access. We should be looking at the cost of higher education. We should be looking at how do we support degree and certificate programs that get people into good paying jobs. We should be talking about how do we increase minimum wage. These are all the things that impact somebody's ability to thrive. This property tax piece is really just a symptom of a much bigger problem because the state is not doing its primary job here. We recently passed in the North Carolina General Assembly a measure that will put a constitutional amendment on the ballot in November of 2026. And that constitutional amendment addresses property taxes, except not really. All this constitutional amendment really does is give the General Assembly authority that it already has. So if the people in charge in the General Assembly really cared about lowering your bills, about making sure that you had money in your pockets to pay for groceries, to pay for your bills, to pay for your medication, they could do something today about property taxes. They do not need a constitutional amendment to do that. This is a political ploy because the party in charge is desperate. And we have to be stronger than that. We have to work hard to make sure people understand what's really at stake here. And we must be supporting our counties and our municipalities differently so that everybody has an opportunity to thrive in North Carolina.
While we thought this entire documentary would be about the lack of a budget, we were surprised to hear that one had finally been brought forward for a vote. It was going to come out on Wednesday with a vote on Thursday with no opportunity for amendments or debate. Right after the announcement, but before the vote, we met with Representative Deb I Will Not Yield Butler from District 18.
We're not going to let anybody touch her. I will not yield, Mr. Speaker.
The stark reality is that when we disinvest in public education, it is the rural areas of our state that suffer the most. That's kind of a cruel irony because most of the people who support this voucher scheme that we are seeing unfold represent those very districts. So if anybody out there can tell me why that is, because I'm still at a loss about that. Places like New Hanover County and Wilmington, which is where I represent, we have the financial resources. They're not unlimited, certainly, and people are beginning to feel it in their property taxes. But we have the opportunity, just because of size, to bridge that gap and to use county monies to make our teachers whole, or as close to whole as we can get them. But places that are very rural and very sparsely populated can't do that. So consequently, their public schools suffer the most. So, but here's the problem, because now the legislature, this is just, the audacity of this. The legislature says, we're not going to fund public education in a manner that the North Carolina Constitution requires. We're going to disinvest from that. We're going to put almost $1 billion in these vouchers that are going into private schools. And then when New Hanover County or Mecklenburg County or Guilford County or any of these other counties try to supplement, we're now trying to pass a bill that would prohibit them from raising property taxes that that would help bridge the gap that we created. Again, I don't understand the logic, because a sound basic education for all North Carolina children is enshrined in the Constitution. It is the cornerstone of all good workforce development. You talk about all of this business. We're number one in business. We're all of this. We're all of that. We won't be for long if we don't educate every child. And the cracks, this disinvestment over the last 15 years, you don't see these cracks overnight because we had built such a strong system. But you are seeing the cracks now, and you're seeing it kind of chug. Well, 7,000 teacher vacancies. I'll go back to that. That pretty much says it all.
We met with a Wake County Elementary School principal, Barbara Fair, to discuss how the issues really impact schools on a day-to-day basis.
I'm Barbara Fair. I am a principal of an elementary school. I have been in education for about 21 years. Education is my second career. I was a registered nurse first for about 20 years. I have loved being in education in elementary school and seeing what we can help children do and grow and be in the future. When I hire teachers, I am looking to hire the best candidate. And what that means is I am posting a position. Teachers have a lot of choice because there is a shortage of teachers coming out of colleges with educational background. I interview teachers who are from another career that do an alternate licensure pathway. I've hired them as well. And I have to look at what is best for my school. When you have less applicants applying and you hear some of the reasons that teachers at the end of the year say, "Oh, I'm leaving," and it's not because I don't like your school. It's not because I don't love living here in North Carolina. It's because I can't make a living and I need to go to another state that values teachers more. That crushes me, right? It hurts my heart because I know they're a good teacher. They want what's best for students and I want them at my school, but I don't have the control over that. I don't control the amount of money that they get paid. I can control the environment and the culture of my school to make it a good working conditions for that teacher and make them happy to be there. But ultimately, everyone has to make a living and everyone has to do what's best for themselves and their family. There are quite a few staff members who are at retirement age who have been working their whole life in education, have put so much time and energy in. And it's important that they get supported in the way of their with their state pension. They need to be able to live after putting their whole life energy into making public education great. And if the when there's bonuses that are given or there's supplements that are given, that does not affect base pay, which ultimately affects their monthly rate that they will be able to get in retirement. So having bonuses are not necessarily a bad thing because everyone would like more money to be able to keep up with inflation. But if you look long term, it doesn't help the individual that way.
While we were talking to Principal Fair, they were actually voting on the new budget at the General Assembly. A week later, on July 7th, Governor Josh Stein signed the budget into law. As he said, it was a necessary budget and they had to sign it, but it doesn't go far enough, especially for our schools. When we talk about improving education in North Carolina, we have to recognize that there is no single solution. It requires a partnership between the state, counties, school districts, businesses, nonprofits, and our communities. As legislators, our role is to prioritize education funding through the state budget. The budget directly impacts our schools by supporting teacher pay, school staff, classroom resources, exceptional children's programs, services for English learners, career and technical education, and other programs that help students succeed. While we have passed the state budget, we should have invested more. We must continue investing in our educators, providing competitive salaries to recruit and retain quality teachers, and ensuring our schools have the resources they need to support every student. Here in Forsyth County, the state budget is only one piece of the puzzle. County commissioners provide critical local funding for school operations, facilities, technology, and other needs, while school leaders determine how resources are used to best support students. Strong collaboration among all levels of government is essential. It has been over a decade since the North Carolina budget has properly addressed school education funding. So it takes more than just politicians to get the job done. We went to Youngsville, North Carolina to meet with Aisha Pandy of the Giving Tree, a thrift store whose profits go to local schools.
My name is Aisha Pandy. I am executive director of the Giving Tree in Wake Forest and Youngsville. And we have been around for 13, going on 13 years. We're a nonprofit based off of donations, so think of us as a fancy version of Goodwill. And then all of our proceeds go back to public, private, and charter schools in the Wake Forest and Youngsville zip codes. We were founded by 4 local moms who were all PTA parents and found that no matter how much fundraising they did, it was a lot of work for a little return.
So if it started from 4 PTA moms, how did you enter the picture?
I just entered the picture as just working here. They needed a little bit of extra help, so I would come in and help run the register, help put things out. I stayed for several years, and then eventually they offered me to become store manager. And then a couple years into that, they said, "Hey, you look like you have a lot of time on your hands, and we're all trying to raise our families, go to soccer practice, and we don't really have the time to run a business. Would you like to do this for us?" So I said yes, and it has grown since then. I've been in charge, I've been director since 2018, and since then we have opened a second location. Wake Forest is our first home base, and now we have a sister store here in Youngsville. So the money that we give the schools annually, we present to the PTA president and the principal of the school, and together they decide what they use it for. We don't say you have to use it for this. They can use it for whatever they want. And in the past, they have used it for teacher incentives, teacher appreciation, updating uniforms, band equipment, sports stuff. So it's just a little bit of extra cushioning where they didn't have to do anything to get it.
Okay. So what was like, let's say last year's take? How much did you donate to schools last year?
So last year, between both of our stores, we raised $50,000.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm proud of it. And since our inception in 2013, we have given back just over $300,000.
That's amazing. We want to thank everyone who took the time to meet with us because we feel this is an important topic and we're happy to be able to share that information with you. But it's not over. Just because a documentary is ending, just because a budget is passed, doesn't mean our work is done. So make sure you take the advice of the people in this documentary and get involved, get engaged, help if you can, vote because you have to. We still have to face the burden of education in North Carolina.
Please go to your schools and volunteer. They need more adults in the schools.
Yeah, so I mean, when it comes down to your candidates that you're supporting around public education, if you live in a district where either your representative or your senator, they're good, like they're supporting our public schools, just make sure that there's lots of other candidates out there that you could support with your